Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us for this virtual event. Before we get started, I just want to give a quick little rundown as to how tonight's event came to be. For the last 2 years, the Mizzou Black Alumni chapter here in New York has held a happy hour during the month of June. However, due to the COVID-19 pandemic and us not being able to get together in person, I thought this would be a great opportunity for us to come together as a community virtually to reflect on and expand the conversation around the recent civil unrest in the US following the death of George Floyd last month. What's going on right now in this country is what I, along with the panelists and many of our audience members, lived through at Mizzou 5 years ago. Right now is a tough time for Americans, and as the current events show, even tougher to be Black in America. We specifically decided to hold the event tonight as a pre-kickoff to Juneteenth, the holiday that celebrates the official end of slavery in the US in 1865, 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. Although we've overcome much in the last 100 plus years, we still have a long way to go in achieving equity in this country. But before we begin, I'd like to say thank you to our panelists for having this conversation with us. We really appreciate you taking the time to share space with us, be in community with us, and inspire us as we move forward. We're all an expert in our own individual experiences. Each panelist is here to offer insight into their lived experience, and we ask that both panelists and audience members please be respectful of this during tonight's event. Also, thank you to the nearly 200 people who've registered, who will be tuning in across the country tonight. We appreciate your support and hope you leave this event having learned something and feeling motivated to push the conversation forward. One final thing, please feel free to submit any questions you have for panelists or myself via the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Please note, the panelists will only be seen by myself, or the questions, will only be seen by myself and the panelists. Please reserve the chat function for constructive and respectful conversation. If you'd like to tweet along for the next hour, please use #TigerTruths. We're also hoping to post and share video from tonight's event. Sitting on our panel tonight, we have Ayanna Poole, a 2015 English Literature, Creative Writing, and African American Literature graduate. She is also a founding member of Concerned Students 1950, as well as an educator, author, and national activist. Next, we have Payton, a 2016 political science and Black studies graduate and well-renowned speaker and change agent. And finally, we have Jasmine Burrell, a 2015 graduate from the School of Journalism. She's currently a creative strategist at Snap Inc. So with all of those housekeeping things taken care of, let's get started. Ayanna, my first question is actually for you. Being one of the founding members of Concerned Students 1950, have you seen measurable change by Mizzou and other universities in addressing issues of racism and discrimination on their campus since 2015? And following these recent weeks of protests, along with the COVID-19 pandemic, do you think the response of universities to their students will be different than last time?
Right. So in terms of University of Missouri, I will say that 5 of our demands were actually met. And I do think that that's something that I should say and mention, because when we think of Mizzou, no university wants to be Mizzou again, right? No universities are literally running from being Mizzou. They're quick to jump on issues. And so I do want to make sure that I credit the work that has been done in Mizzou since we left, right? However, there is still so much that needs to be done. There's so much work that needs to be done. We still have LBC demands that have not been met. I think that we still need to take focus when we're talking about faculty, when we're talking about mental health professionals on campus. We can also think in terms of the policies against protesting and all of these policies that have been put in place on campus in order to really silence our Black students and their experiences. More recently, we see again that the same thing that happened with Mike Brown, where they wanted to have these discussions and these conversations. We see that Mizzou is pushing for these conversations to happen again. But if we reflect back on 2015, we reflect back on 2014, how effective were those conversations? If I cannot remember her name, actually I do. Kathy Scroggs actually referred to these as bitch fest. And so when I think of that, and I excuse my language, but when I think in terms of that, I reflect on administration making students feel like they have a seat at the table in order for them to feel like they have that voice, but not actually pushing for that change. And so power to the students that are still on campus doing that work.
Great, thank you. Payton, my next question is for you. You were Missouri student body president during the protest of 2015. Taking from your experience as a campus leader during that time, how do you think other campus leaders are feeling about this current movement?
Great question, Mel. I would say that many students who I've talked to feel incredibly empowered. There is an infrastructure that's put in place in so many different ways that didn't exist before, because Mizzou in many ways destigmatized the role of the student body president and the student governing structure to actually speak out on real change on campus. In my time as a policy fellow at the National Campus Leadership Council in Washington, D.C., I worked directly with student body presidents, and we crafted campus inclusion guides, and we empowered them to have these difficult dialogues, not only with themselves, but with their campus administrations. We helped them frame the way that they could have conversations with one another. And so I see it now. I see students organizing. I travel to universities all around the nation, and I work with young Black student body presidents. And I see that they are organizing amongst each other. They are listening to each other. They're reaching across the country in many different ways to have these conversations. And it's interesting because this solidarity took place so much in 2015. I had student government presidents reaching out to me from South Africa, from Poland, from Chile, from HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities that are, have a different set of issues to tackle. But at the end of the day, it's one common goal. And it's having these difficult dialogues around diversity, these difficult dialogues around white supremacy and how it manifests itself on campuses all across the nation. So when I look at, 2015 versus 2020, I still see so much power in the office, not only of student body president, but student leaders on campus, people feeling the need to step up, people feeling empowered, like they have the language to be able to come to these conversations and do it from a student leadership lens. I've been even seeing stuff out of MSA, which was fascinating because when I first got into office, the president before me told me not to say anything about Ferguson, told me not to make a statement that I would further divide campus, that we didn't get involved in political issues, basically to that effect. And I remember thinking, well, what's the whole point of having a Black president and a Black vice president if we're not going to be able to at least provide some leadership or sustainable conversations on these issues? So I'm incredibly proud of students today as they're organizing. And if there's anything that I can do to support for those who are out there, feel free to reach out.
Great, thank you. Jasmine, my next question is for you. You're a graduate from the #1 school of journalism. You focused on strategic communications. Mm-hmm. And one thing we've been noticing, a lot of these brands have, been coming out with different statements, with different things that they're doing. My question for you, what has been your take on how corporate America has been responding to these recent events? What brands, if any, do you think have done better than other in their response to the recent civil unrest?
That's a great question, Mel. I feel like, of course, it is painstakingly obvious that brands that did not give us any attention before are now giving us attention now, as if Black people came out yesterday. So it's really crazy to witness and be in real time. Like, as a lot of people that are watching know, I came from the agency side. So I was in these rooms originally trying to push these conversations and get this representation, and it was never on go. And a lot of these brands, it was, that was not what they wanted to do. And so with that being said, honestly, I feel like it's too early to tell what brands are doing what they need to do. And because at the end of the day, it's been a month and it has been a very tumultuous month, but it is, it's going to sound good. We're going to keep seeing these posts with the white letters and the Black background, and they stand in solidarity. But until we see some action, both internally and externally, then I have yet to be impressed. I can say with my current company, they have done a lot of things internally to really make strides in trying to better, make things right within the internal culture. But with that being said, we can't just let this be a blip in time. And I feel like we really have to wait before we give brands credit, because we can't say that it's due at this point.
Okay, and I just want to follow up. You mentioned your current employer, Snap. You said they've done a really good job in terms of trying to address things internally. How does that compare to maybe the previous agencies? Because you mentioned, speaking up and they wouldn't take action. How does your current employer differ from your last few jobs?
Oh, Melody, that is a question. Oh, child. Just to be frank, to give people a little background, I used to work I've been at a few agencies since I graduated in spring 2015. But I have had a lot of experiences. I was hired at an agency as a diversity hire. I didn't realize that because I was young. And I was literally hired explicitly to be on Ciroc. And my first week at this agency, there was a client call with the clients who of course were Black clients, and it was a call and they were basically complaining they feel like they didn't have anybody to represent them. So basically they said, oh well, no, wait, we have somebody Black here now, so you don't have to worry, you can still keep your business. And of course it was absolutely a learning experience, and I am still very close with those clients to these days. But at this particular agency, they are known to be a progressive agency. I experienced so much backlash for speaking out and having conversations at this agency, and then when I left, they had posted pictures of Future and Travis Scott on the walls and with stickers. So, and at that same agency, when I would play like hip hop music, they would instantly turn it. So it's always interesting to see, how it looks on the outside versus what's actually going on inside. And at Snap, it's not like that at all. Like I literally had just tweeted about, of course, tomorrow is Juneteenth. And a lot of places are like, oh, the company's going to be off. Snap was like, no, we are going to have our Black employees take that day off, but everybody else to take that time to reflect, and you will be at work. So I was like, oh, I can't help but to stand. But that's just one of the many things that they have really done. And I've also been like a part of a committee to address the larger issue of like mental health and the role that Snap plays in that, specifically with the Black community. So they have been not only answering for things immediately, but also planning to have sustaining programming in the future to really to keep that diversity coming into the company, and also to make the people that are there feel welcome, which is not something I have experienced at any agency prior to.
So to kind of follow up on that, we're just talking about making change internally and stuff. I'll direct the first question or the next question to Ayanna, and as well as directed to you and Payton. Over the last few months, we've dealt with tons of new decisions. And the big thing people want to focus on is a diversity of thought. Besides focusing on this diversity of thought, what actionable things do you think universities or corporate companies should be doing so that their leadership team represents the diverse makeup of their student body or their workforce? And I'll direct it to Ayanna first.
Right. So actionable things for universities. I currently work with BLC, the Black Liberation Collective, and I'm a strong advocate in having these universities defund from the police. Because if you have the students who...
Sorry, Ayanna, can you just speak up a little bit? Sorry, I can hear you.
Now?
Yeah, that's perfect.
All right. So we have these these Black students who are on these campuses, who are direct victims of police.
Hold on 1 second. Sorry. Sorry, put that one more time. Okay, try it again. Sorry.
Okay, does it sound better now?
Better, yeah.
All right, should I start over?
Yes, please.
Okay. So if you could do me a favor, do you mind repeating the question just so I can make sure that I'm on track?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So over the last few months, we've dealt with tons of new decisions. And a big thing people want to focus on when talking about diversity and diversity of their boards is diversity of thought. But what actionable things do you think universities or corporate companies should be doing so that their leadership team represents the diverse makeup of their student body or their workforce?
Right. I think that this is actually, and let me rewind, and I'm going to still say what I was mentioning before, but I think this is as simple as hiring, right? In the UM systems, we now have where we actually have this collective of students, of administration, of staff, of all of these people who embody the community in order to make sure that we have some people in administration who are actually seeing our Black students and our students of color, our marginalized populations, right? But still at Mizzou, we have an interim president, right? And so what are we doing with these bodies of people in order to make sure that we're hiring people that reflect the same population that we're serving, right? At the University of Missouri, it was very seldom that I was able to actually communicate with somebody who was in administration that looked like right? It's difficult for me to communicate to that to somebody who has not lived that experience, right? And so making sure that when we are hiring, we are intentional in the people that we are hiring and how they service the communities that they service before they even got to the University of Missouri. We're quick, and we can talk about any campus, right? They're quick to hire somebody because of these accolades and all of these different things, right? You have an amazing degree, you have this, but what have you actually been doing in the United States across the country? Service the students that look like the students that we have on campus, especially the students who feel voiceless, right? And so in really being I think universities need to really, really push for defunding from police on their campuses and investing in alternative response teams. Because terrorized, who have been victims of police brutality. They've seen it on the television, they've seen it on social media, they've seen it in their own communities. And then when they get on campus, it's something they still have to deal with, right? And so in being very, very intentional with the programs that we're developing, being very, very intentional that's all I'm going to say, because I don't want to steal anyone else's answers, and I know that everybody on this call has a lot to provide for this question.
Okay. Going to Jasmine and then Payton. Jasmine, kind of same question, what can these corporate companies make sure to do that their leadership teams do reflect their workforce?
Yeah, absolutely. I am completely and totally aligned with Ayanna on this, because the same holds true when it comes to being in the corporate setting. Unfortunately, we see, particularly in the marketing and media industry, we see that people think just being a face is enough. And there's an age-old tale, all skin folk ain't kinfolk. And you see that even more when it comes to corporate that has such old boy roots. And, it's really unfortunate to see. I know a few months back during Black History Month, in the ad world specifically, there was a campaign that went live where there were a headshot series of Black professionals in the ad industry, and they deemed themselves the illustrious 5%. And I literally, my jaw dropped. I was like, why on earth would you be proud to be a part of 5% of an industry in the year 2020? And now we see that means nothing, because now as we're advancing, the Black lives didn't matter until it became a moment in time, until it became a hashtag they were able to have, that they had to say something about. And you weren't worried about your presence being there. So with that being said, it does need to be intentional hires in the corporate setting as well. You do need to go in there as a Black person trying to get into corporate, being your true self, because the bootlicking is gonna work, but you will be unhappy. So when you go in those interviews, if there are any upcoming seniors or recent graduates, you need to go in there and be yourself, say what you expect for your company to do and represent for you. And now is the perfect time to do it. And when it comes to my industry in particular, it's really easy to get people in entry level and mid-level positions, but it's always lacking in leadership. And now that there is a scope on that, I feel like companies will, take more heed to that. And I'm very fortunate to be the company that has a Black CMO. But with that being said, you just still have to, see how people feel and see where they actually net out on issues that pertain to you. And so it's very, very similar. You can't just hire somebody because they check off a box or it sounds good, it looks good. You need to hire somebody that is really going to contribute not only to the overall Black experience at that company, but to the work that the company is putting out, because that's also a thing. Because I've been at agencies where there has been a Black person in the room and the work that's been sent out has been horrendous, and it's because they really didn't have that insight or that care or that intention while being in that room to make their voice matter. So very similar to Ayanna, you have to be very particular, and you do need to hire, but you need to hire correctly.
Those are great responses from both of you. I'll kind of change the question for you, Payton. So my question for you, what actionable advice do you have for leaders on campus and or corporate America that want to be a change agent following these recent events? We've seen people posting about they want to get educated, they want to do all these things, but what advice do you have for people who want to change things within where they are?
I would say open the purse, number one. Listen to Black people, validate Black people, because it's funny that we're having this conversation now, but We've been saying all of this stuff for literally forever. And now, you know, it's important that people want to tune in, but we've been saying the same things over and over and over and over and over again. So for any institution, for me, I'm like, look, if you want a consulting relationship, we can establish that. You can go to paytonhead.com and fill out the form, but I'm done doing this for free because we've been doing this for free. We've been trying to educate people. I sat down with chancellor after chancellor at Mizzou and told them what the issues were. And they decided, you know, to either brush it to the back burner or say like, oh, or invalidate what I was saying. One chancellor literally spoke over me the entire time, every single time we had a meeting. And I'm like, I represent 28,000 of your students. Do you want to know like what's going on? Or do you want to continue to talk over me in this time? And this was an issue that he apparently had like with the faculty, with other people as well. So I would say, like, I would echo everything that has been said already by these two incredible women. And I would say, like, hire Black people in every single role, make cultural competency a requirement. A lot of times, you know, we just hire people willy-nilly and then it's just like, oh, well, we have an incident or something that happens. And well, now there's a mandatory diversity dialogue and we're all going to talk about like why this was problematic. We are over that right now. If you don't have the skills, the library has been open. The authors have been out there. The resources have been shared. And especially for universities who continue to ask this question, what can we do? If you go to all of these different websites, there were websites that literally compiled all of the demands that students were making across the country, all the way from like Harvard to Yale to the University of Alaska. And that's a starting place right there. It was on thedemands.org. It's on the Black Liberation Collective. I would also say, like, look at the basic things that people have been talking about for years and years. You can point to the 1968 demands for LBC, and I guarantee you that demand list is similar to most universities in this country. The same things that students have been talking about. We're talking about faculty. We're talking about retention. We're talking about overall access to the institution. We're talking about scholarships, need-based scholarships, and aid. We are sick of, I have so many loans to Mizzou, and I have done so much work for free for Mizzou, and I'm over it. Localize the issues. A lot of times people think that they have to reach out to these Mizzou, and I'm not gonna talk too much about Mizzou, but they literally paid $100,000 to a white PR firm to make these issues go away when the answers were right there. And so when you localize the issues, you can understand that institutional knowledge that we think isn't important about 2015, about anything else that's going on, the institutional knowledge is right there. The systemic violence is right there. We can look at our own institution as a case study. Those of us who were in the institution, it's the academy. So we study this stuff. You have a center for race. You have a center for Black studies. And they've been doing this work. Look to the people who've been doing this work. I would also say understand how this affects every single facet of either your school or your company. A lot of times people think that it's an issue that you put off to one chief diversity officer. I had one president at a university that I was consulting brag to me how she was happy that, you know, they established the chief diversity officer role and she would meet with them once a month. And I remember thinking, like, first of all, like your entire cabinet for your institution is white. And you hired a chief diversity officer to say that you're prioritizing these issues, and you didn't even put them on you didn't even think it was good enough to put them on your cabinet. And then I would also say, getting back to the understanding how this is ingrained in every single facet of every single school. So a lot of people think that we don't have to have those conversations in the business school. Business is more globalized now more than ever. We have to understand how, if you want to make money, you have to understand how to work with people from different cultures and different backgrounds and different beliefs than you. We're having a lot of conversations around like nursing and hospitals. This is a pandemic. Nurses don't have a class that they can take where they can learn resources about how to care for marginalized communities or look at the implicit biases that they have towards people and actively address it. I think that's one of the biggest contributors that we have right now to the maternal morbidity rate for Black women in America. It's white and brown doctors who, you know, don't necessarily understand the nuances of race and how they can play into racism in the way that they treat people. And so I would just really, really encourage people to look at your own facet of it and understand that every single one of us has a role to play. And that's from institutions and higher education, and that's on the corporate level as well. And to Jasmine's point, talking about how you oftentimes will see diversity hires in different places, but you won't see them in the C-suite. You won't see them in the CEO positions. And these are the positions that have a lot of impact. And so where you place people also tells a lot about the prioritization of Black and brown voices within your company. So you can put up a black square and say Black Lives Matter all you want, but until you actually show that in your structure, not only of your university, but of your corporate structure, whatever it may be, then I really don't think that we're going to see the change that is needed to move us through right now.
That was great. Before I go on with the next question, I just want to remind people, if you guys have questions for Ayanna, Jasmine, Payton, myself, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Please submit any questions you have. We have over 100 people on, and I'm pretty sure if people have questions that they'd love to give to our panelists. So please make sure to submit that down there in that Q&A box. I did have like a follow-up question. Payton, you mentioned like with business and the C-suite, and one thing we've been covering on our network is just the lack of diversity within the C-suite in terms of, getting Black and brown people at the CEO positions, those higher up positions. And I guess I'll kind of direct it towards Jasmine. Jasmine, what specific programs, steps do you think could be done to increase the number of Black and brown people who are going into the C-suite? Because one thing I've noticed and had conversations with people about, a lot of companies do a great job at like getting them at the intern or the entry level, but they don't do a good job. They don't do a great job of retaining them or making sure that they get up to those higher up positions.
Yeah, that was literally what I was about to say. The issue has and will always be retention. You cannot just keep having Black faces and you're not actually taking care of those Black faces in that place. If you don't have a place that's equipped to deal with those feelings, it's a place that is going to speak to the protests that are going on, the place that is going to speak to Juneteenth, you're not going to be able to keep that talent. And that's just what it boils down to. And so you can get as many people in the entry level position as you want, but if you do not actually get those people to stay there, then it won't matter. And that's, I think that's step one, will always be retention. And then also there's always going to be that elephant in the room. That glass ceiling is still there. There are people that have been passed up for promotions across all companies. It was actually a very strange phenomenon. I feel like a lot of people had this, and I'm sure my other panelists had it as well, where you had white people that you used to work with or you used to know that were texting you and telling you about when you did used to work with them, all the things that they could have done. And I'm just like, this is a moot point at this point. And it just goes to show you that it really is institutionalized in the way that they think and the way that it's operating all the way up. So it really does start with retention. And it starts with actually having programs to truly and fairly assess progress and reviews to be able to get those people in those positions. And also the higher up you go is more based on network more than anything. And at the end of the day, as long as we keep having universities like Mizzou turn out talent that is interested in these positions, they won't have a choice but to have us up there because we will be the workforce. So just really just sticking through with it and doing what you need to do. But also the other elephant in the room is start our own businesses. We always brag about having a seat at the table when we can make our own table. We have these voices that carry, we have these voices that matter, and we do not need a black picture with white words to tell us that. And we have the skills, we have the talents to be able to make that carry on our own, and they know that. So I think, if you want to be your own, if you want to have a C-suite, you can make your own C-suite, and you can make it with friends and with people that have the same values as you and the same determination as you. And if you want to move up in the corporate ladder of places that are already there, just stick to it and stick to your guns and demand what you need to make yourself clear. Ask for what you want, ask for the pay that you deserve and the positions that you require. And at some point, they're going to have to listen. But I think that at the beginning steps, it's always going to be about companies truly focusing on retaining Black talent and really making them a place where they feel comfortable to grow and nurture that growth the way they do for other people that work at these places.
That was great. Thank you. Ayanna, I want to direct the next question to you. You're now an educator. And so I'd like to ask you, how do you take what you've learned from your experiences at Mizzou and apply them to your classroom? I feel like that just kind of be like a good type of insight to get from you.
Yeah. So I actually teach middle school, and so I keep in mind the age, right? They're a lot different from talking to college students. But these students are so radicalized, even before they met me. These are children who saw Trump go into office. These are students who are watching everything that is happening around the world. And so being intentional in my classroom to teach cultural competency, to prepare these students for this world that actually exists, because so often we try to hide these conversations from children. And the reality is these children have a million questions. They have a million answers. There is so much that we can learn from them, and there is so much that they can learn from us. And so just being very intentional about the curriculum that I'm putting out there. Luckily for me, I teach English, right? So I can bring in that Black literature. I can bring in literature that looks like them, and I can actually sit down and have these discussions with my students. My students are not strangers to Freedom Friday. On Freedom Friday, we have these deep discussions where we talk about things that seventh graders typically do not talk about. We talk about mass incarceration. We talk about systems of oppression. We talk about things that are happening right there in our own communities. And the students have so many things that they have that have affected them, not only in their own communities, but within the school system that is supposed to be serving them, protecting them, and educating them. And so I'm very, very intentional about making sure that these children are growing and that they feel protected, because the world outside of those walls does not protect them. And if I'm being honest, as an educator, not every educator is going to love them and protect them and teach them the things that they need to be these citizens that are going to be change agents in the future. And so just being very, very intentional about, and I keep using that word, but I think that everything has to be intentional, especially when we're working with babies and when we're talking about this whole Black Lives Matter movement. Everything has to be intentional. I didn't have to change myself. I didn't have to step away from activism and walk into a classroom and only be a teacher. I'm able to step into that space, and thank God I work in a Black district, but I'm able to step into that space with these Black babies and these brown babies, and I'm actually able to listen to them, and I don't silence them. I let them live their experiences, and then we talk about it, and we talk about what we're gonna do next. And so I'm grateful for that experience. I think that I've learned more as an activist change to an educator than I ever could if I would have remained in the role of just an activist. And so I just love my babies. I could go on. I'm not going to keep going on. I actually, one of my students just released a campaign to have my district defund from the police, and that was not me who said anything about it. And so just to see how empowered they are, I can only imagine what they do at the next level.
And I just want to make sure this is like a seventh grader who's like coming together. Wow. And I just think, like you said, that it shows just how much of an impact educators can have. My mom is a teacher. She's tuning in now. And one thing she's always done with her students for the last 20 years is talk about Juneteenth, so that they have an idea of what these things are that aren't necessarily put, within the text of, the curriculum or anything. So I think that's just really great, just kind of showing how each person can be an action of change one way or another when it comes to having these conversations. I'm going to go ahead and start doing some Q&A, some questions from our audience members. We have a lot in here. Okay, so I'm going to go with the first question from Kay Ingram. Hey, Kay, thanks for tuning in. She wants to know, and I guess it's directed to all of you, or whoever can best answer it, which I'm thinking probably Payton or Ayanna. What can students or universities do to be sure all students are exposed to important conversations such as this one on a regular basis?
Payton, since I just answered the last question, I'll let you start it off.
I had to unmute myself. That's a great question, Kay. I really think that amplifying these voices that are oftentimes silenced is so important. And I think that's one of the reasons why I always speak about the importance of privilege. And a lot of times people think that when we hear privilege, we get turned off because it's just like, oh, white privilege this. But a lot of students have political capital on campus. And I was privileged enough, like when I started, working and learning and growing at Mizzou, to develop a platform that I could use. And I could use my platform in either two ways. I could take pictures and be cute with Truman all day and promote MSA puppy drives, or, I could do the latter and be on the front of the Columbia Missourian, because I didn't even know that was going to be a thing, with me and my vice president, because we decided that we were going to take a public, in a public way, be out there and supporting our students who were laying in the streets when Michael Brown passed away, was killed. And so I think that students really have to say, like, they have to pick, like, this is the time right now. You can either speak up or you can be silent. But I think that they are understanding now the importance of being on the right side of history. And we also see the silence. The silence is so loud. I see it a lot of times. The silence seems to be so loud at Mizzou. So I'm so glad to see so many people who feel empowered right now to speak up on these issues and to speak out. And that's not me dragging you for like you not being in the position or like understanding or whatever that happened back then. But I want you to feel empowered to use your voice, because it is imperative, like the urgency of now using your voice and amplifying those voices on campus that are making a difference, and validating them and learning from them and having conversations with them. I remember I had one student from the Boot Hill of good old Missouri, and he emailed me this 2-page essay talking about how he thought that I was a racist for speaking out about racism on campus. And the way that I handled it, instead of saying like, boy, bye, I said, why don't you come to my office and we can have a conversation about it? And we started talking about the nuances of race in America. And come to find out, when we talk about, like when Ayanna talks about the importance of having these conversations like in the classroom, we have to look at our K-12 curriculum, because many students and many people are just learning about race by the time when they get to higher ed, when they get to college, or when people are raising hell on campus and they don't know why, because they were always taught that if you work hard in America, then you can do anything that you want to do. When in reality, that's not the same situation for all of us. And so that's what I would say, encouraging those students to be a part of those conversations and then joining in on themselves. Also, too, solidarity has to be built. That means that just as much as people have to learn about your community, you can learn about theirs. And so I often use the example of me, like, sitting in, going to a couple events. You don't have to join an organization, but like just tuning into different events where they're talking about something different. I went to Unification my freshman year at Mizzou. It was the Asian student orientation. I just wanted to learn more about it. And at first I thought it was like taking up space. But then like everybody was so glad to see me, and they were so glad to see that I was like taking an interest in the multifaceted cultures of all of these different students. And so when 2015 came around, there were many Asian students who were getting involved, like, hey, I know that guy, and I know that what he has to say isn't BS because I know him personally, and I know that he's not making this up. And so I would say that people really, really have to learn how to step outside of their comfort zone and build relationships. And for those of us who have the privilege of finances or whatever, or travel privileges, that's so important. I know it's a little stigmatized right now under the pandemic, but for me, I've been to Israel and Palestine twice, right? The first time I went, it was, to learn more about Israel. The second time I went, I was on the Palestine side the entire time. I've been to Berlin. I've been to Senegal. I've been to these different places where I got to learn so much about different cultures and different people. And so I'm just saying that that's also a critical component. And that's one of the things that is so powerful and great about higher ed, is the fact that you do have all of these people in one place. But oftentimes we feel comfortable with siloing off into whatever things feel comfortable. College is an uncomfortable experience in general. So you might as well make yourself more uncomfortable by learning and being conscious and intentional about your learning, and being conscious and intentional and showing up and supporting people when they say that they are hurt, that they are going unheard, or when they say that they're hurting. Because I will just say that silence is just not the answer. It never has been the answer. And I just hope that students today are empowering each other to really tune in on conversations and share resources. So that's all I have to say on that.
I want to add on, because I think oftentimes we ask, what can the students do? And I want us to keep in mind that being a student is a lot. Being a student is traumatic within itself, especially when you're a Black student on a PWI campus, but even on an HBCU campus. And a lot of times we as students, especially student organizers on campus, we take on a lot of work that we should not take on. We have to put that pressure on our administration and inundate those spaces for that critical conversation to happen, but also happen because administration wasn't doing anything. Absolutely. But really, really pressuring your university to be intentional to make sure those conversations happen, because being a Black student on a campus is a lot within itself. It's a political statement to be on there, but think about having to sit in classes with other white folks that don't even want to sit by you. Think about all of the micro students. We want students to be responsible for the change that's going to happen on campus. We can fight all day, but until we put that pressure on administration, that onto our administration than we are onto our students.
Okay. Just to kind of keep with pacing, guys, for the next couple of questions, because we have a lot of them coming in, if you can try to stay to like about a minute and a half, that'd be great. I'll direct the next question to Jasmine. Jasmine, this one comes from Stephanie Burt. She said, since graduating from Mizzou, you've also lived in Dallas and Atlanta before settling in New York. Did the events that transpired in Columbia back in 2015 play any role in that decision-making? Why did you choose these cities to start your career in?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Just to be clear, I graduated from Mizzou in spring 2015. So I was already removed from campus once the Concerned Student 1950 group began. So my introduction to activism on Mizzou's campus actually began in fall 2014 with the MU for Mike Brown organization, which was started by Naomi Daughtry and Jennifer Pagan, two queer Black women from Chicago that were able to galvanize an entire campus. They were having protests on campus in Columbia. They were having protests in actual Ferguson. So that was my experience when it came to the protests and to the activism on campus. And I am extremely grateful to have been there during that chapter, because I feel like they really did light that fire into what came after a lot of us had left campus. So shout out to both of those lovely women. So that's where my experience was rooted in. And but with that being said, my experience with the Concerned Student 1950 was very interesting, because I was actually in my first internship in Dallas at a PR agency that was very conservative. It's a conservative city. It was a conservative company. And I was literally having to go into work almost with, and I'm saying shame for lack of a better word, but like there were like eyes were piercing through me. I was already the only Black person in there. It was already the issue of this conversation being bubbling up in my hometown, like in my college town. And so it was a very interesting experience for me. But the reason why I actually picked those cities is I actually had a chance to go back to Kansas City, where I'm from, or intern in Dallas. And I decided to go to Dallas, and I interned at a very large PR agency and stayed with my good friend Simone Magatha. I think she's watching. Hey girl. And she was just, so I really just went there because I wanted to try something new. And then Atlanta, being that I was at this corporate place with all these old white people, to be frank, I was like, oh, let me go try it, Atlanta. Let me see something different. And I absolutely loved Atlanta for what it was. It was such a good time. But when I moved to New York City, I got the job opportunity of a lifetime to work with Spike Lee, his creative agency. So that's what brought me here. And this is the most diverse city that I have ever lived in. And it definitely has its pros and its cons, but I would not change the journey for everything. And it really did start back in 2014 for me, and really being able to see those two women really spearhead and light that movement up under everybody's feet. And it's amazing to see how far I came in 2015 and even now in 2020.
That's great. My next question, I guess whoever wants to take a stab at it first. This one's from an anonymous attendee. They said, how do you all suggest to have these difficult conversations about systemic racism, privilege, et cetera, in organizations and spaces that are predominantly white? Having conversations with other Blacks and people of color can be healing, but we know our struggles. How do we take those conversations to people who don't know what our experiences are? And whoever wants to go first can take a stab at it. Anybody?
I can jump in on this just because I've had to do a lot of this recently. I am definitely not an advocate for holding hands with allies. I don't believe in spoon feeding them anything. They are very, very grown adults. So I think that with that being said, I don't want this to be a facetious answer. So with that being said, I think that honestly, a lot of the education aspect comes to it in the basis of that you really just have to not even send them resources, but you need to feel comfortable in yourself before you have these conversations, because then it doesn't come off as if it's an attack. And I can say that firsthand, like with my company, when this all was going on, like I was like, this is real. This is what it is. The numbers back it up. This is, I'm not making this up just to make it up. And so kind of going back to like what like me and Ayanna both said earlier is like really just staying yourself and staying true and holding your ground for things that really impact you. Because at the end of the day, you are an employee, you are a student, you are a member of said organization that you have contributed your time to, your working hours, your man hours, your thinking hours, and they have the right to respect that. And honestly, to be frank, if the place is not receptive of it, you can move right along. Because because there are plenty of companies out here, there are plenty of jobs, there are plenty of people, and Gen Z, and this is definitely another nod to Ayanna's point, Gen Z is coming in and they are coming in strong and they are not putting up with any games. So being that you are the predecessor of that, you might as well take the lead on it, because if we don't do it, they are definitely going to do it. But just always stay true to yourself, stay true in your vision and what you see for the company, and make everything clear. Don't make it like, oh, I feel, I think, I know. This is what's going on. This is what's happening. And this is how I feel about it. So what's next? And it could work out great, like in my case, or it could not. But if it does not work out great, this is the perfect time to get a new job or to figure things out. So.
And I was going to say, before we get any more answers, we have about 10 minutes left, but I think this conversation is just, really great. Are you guys okay if we go about 15 minutes over, just in case we get a few more questions or anything? Because they're coming in strong. So just want to
I don't have nowhere to go.
That's true. We are still in a pandemic. Very true. I'm going to try. Let's see. We got, like I said, some good questions through here. Ayanna, I'll ask this question of you. This one is from Jackie. Her question is, aside from increasing diversity in university administration, what do you find are some of the biggest objectives that should be addressed in higher ed?
All right. I actually want to say that I think Payton answered this question perfectly earlier, because he was talking about putting pressure on making sure that our campuses are culturally competent. And so that's more than just a cultural competent training when you come in. That is actually putting that into the classrooms, right? Retention. I mean, we have an entire program on universities that are about retaining our Black students, right? But then we look at the retention numbers and we ask ourselves, how effective are those programs to do, right? Because we all know that for universities, diversity is not an initiative. It is it's just a pretty thing to put that makes it look like you love your Black students, right? And so making sure that we are retaining those Black students, I can't even count how many students came in with me and Jasmine in 2011 that did not finish with us in 2015. There are probably hundreds, if we're being honest. And nobody is saying anything about why are these students leaving. Nobody is saying what could we have done better to make sure that we retain these Black students. And so we have a graduation rate that is much different than our acceptance rate when it comes to Black students. And so making sure that we're retaining those students and that we're offering those supports, because a lot of students don't feel supported. I know students who left Mizzou simply off of the fact that they did not feel supported on campus, right? And then a scholarship universities have so much money that they can put in so many places, but here we have new dormitories that nobody lives in. We have new buildings that are named after slave owners. We have, we're getting all of these new things to our universities, but actually taking a moment to self-reflect on our campus and our practices and the money and upholding these things that we've upheld since 1839, right? And so just looking at that infrastructure of the campus and making sure that it really, really protects and retains our Black community.
Okay, and sorry, Ayanna, I think maybe you might be bumping against your speaker because it's kind of cutting in and out a little bit, but
Okay.
You're good. Most of it was a good response. And just to kind of follow up then, so our next question comes from Melissa. Her question is, many universities and secondary schools will begin online this fall. How will student and faculty organizing need to evolve in this new environment?
I'm going to say that I think that everybody on this call can agree we are in the middle of a pandemic, and without social media, right, about George Floyd, we would not have known about Breonna Taylor. We would not have had the resurgence of Black at Mizzou happen, right? Because people they're at home. Like, we're at home. We can be a part of this conversation. I mean, we clock in on our bed, we clock out on our bed, and we use social media, because the reality, is it going out again?
Yeah, it was going out a little bit. I got you. No, you're good.
Okay. Because social media does play a large role in activism, no matter how much we hate to say it, no matter how many crazy things happen on social media, and we're like, ooh, I wish that wasn't there because, white folks can see this. But media is just a major role. And I think that that's something that our students and our campuses can utilize to keep this momentum, because we don't want it to be a moment. We've seen so many gaps in time, right, where nothing was happening on campuses. You had very, very small organizations that nobody was backing them. And so I know that social media will be a huge agent in making sure that we can keep this momentum going.
Cool. I mean, the questions keep coming in, guys. We got some really good questions. Let's see. I'm trying to get a couple of new ones here. Let's see. This one comes from Ashley. I personally think that Black leadership is important, but it's hard to attempt to take or assert power or leadership in spaces of privilege. So what's your best advice for companies or universities on how to cultivate Black leaders? And like I said, we might have hit on this a little bit earlier, but if someone wants to take a stab at it, go ahead. Payton?
I would say to do the research. There are organizations out there that specifically cater to developing Black talent. And a lot of times people don't understand. I remember working in DC, and when people wanted to get Black talent, the only place that they would go to was just, oh, we're just going to go to Howard. Same thing with New York. We're just going to go and hire everybody from Howard University, which is great. Like, all power to Howard people. But like, there are incredible associations out there, like the National Association of Black Journalists, the National Society for Black Engineers, the National Association of Black Accountants. Some of my colleagues from 2015 are forming like the National Association of Black Student Body Presidents. There's so many organizations out there, not to mention the Divine Nine, not to mention all of these other organizations that cultivate Black leadership and Black talent. There's a Young Black Elected Leaders Network. There's so many organizations out there. I guarantee you, if you Google it and you want to find a talent pool, go ahead. Like, you can literally find the people there. And if you really want to put your money where your mouth is, send recruiters to the conferences. There is no reason why the University of Missouri, that says that it has, the best school of journalism in the nation, should not be recruiting at the National Association of Black Journalists conference. If you're going to be intentional about it, then you need to show up. There's a National Association of Black hotel owners and hospitality operators. If you run a hospitality school, then you need to be intentional about, like you say, you want to hire Black folks, that's where you can go. And so I really want to encourage, especially those who are always saying like, well, we just can't find Black people. We don't know what to do. Google it. I guarantee you there is an organization and there is an association for Black people, because we have been here since 1619 and we have formed our own communities. We have formed our own professional development organizations, and we have been doing this work. So if you really are intentional about doing it, you will find us. Did I answer that question, Mel? Because I feel like I just got
it. And the next question is very similar, and I'll direct it to Jasmine. This one's from my aunt, Melody Birmingham, named after her, for those of you who don't know. But her question is very similar. She's like, universities like Mizzou serve as a pipeline for corporate employers. Placement rates in jobs is a measure of success for universities. So what role would you want corporations to play in encouraging universities to create a diverse pipeline?
For universities to create a diverse pipeline?
I'm sorry, I read it again. Universities like Mizzou serve as a pipeline for corporate employers. Placement rates in jobs is a measure of success for universities. So what role would you want corporations to play in encouraging universities to create a diverse pipeline?
That is a very interesting question, because I feel like this is gonna probably not be like as fancy of an answer as people would expect, but a lot of the pipeline from universities truly comes from who's already in the company. I'm just gonna, I'm gonna keep it plain and simple. And a lot of it doesn't matter if you are white or black. A lot of times, like I have had students reach out to me of all colors. I'm like, oh, this girl went to Mizzou. I'm going to get you an interview. And I feel it's kind of, definitely like, Mizzou Mafia thing. Shout out J School. But even still, I definitely think that is, kind of just the reality of it all. So with that being said, I definitely recommend that students or people that are at the University of Missouri reach out to Mizzou alumni and continue to go to events like this to continue to build your network. Because as you can see, just based on this panel, me, Payton, and Ayanna have completely different experiences like right now in our actual, careers, but we came from the same beginnings. We came from the same university, and there were 28,000 of us that left together. So especially when it comes to, finding Black alumni or people that look like you, really finding people to truly be in your corner and be your greatest advocate and understand that industry is a huge part of it. Because you really honestly, and I feel like this has been kind of clear, you can't depend on the university to do anything for you that you can't do for yourself, because they're giving you the position, they're giving you the name, they're giving you the degree, but you have to go that extra step to make it be what you want it to be. And there are plenty of us out there that have went through those trials and tribulations of trying to find a job and trying to be the diverse voice in the room, to now we can be your voice and now we can echo you. So depend less on the university and depend more on your community and on yourself and on your ambition to make a difference and really get your voice heard in those rooms. And with that being said, I am always available for any sorts of conversations for any of the girls out there.
And I just want to follow up, because this was kind of like a similar question. So this one comes from Cassidy. What is the best platform or resource for alumni to connect with other alumni, to amplify voices of their peers and work for real change without going through institutional structures like the Mizzou Alumni Network?
For me, LinkedIn. People reach out to me on LinkedIn all the time. I'm also available on Twitter. My Twitter is very different, but people still reach out to me on there. But LinkedIn is always a good way, because especially when you're looking at like career stuff, because it kind of is like your online resume. And I feel like that's one of the best ways to reach me. And also when it comes to reaching out to alumni, really just be genuine. I feel like a lot of times students reach out and, of course it's nerves, it's whatever it may be, but we've been in your shoes, we've had it all happen, we've got our degrees, we've gone through the trials and tribulations of being at the University of Missouri, and just really be yourself and be open to, to actual mentorship and leadership. And I feel like LinkedIn is a great resource to do that, particularly for in the corporate sector, or in not even just corporate, but in career sector in general. And that's the best way to probably reach me too.
Great. I'm going to pose this next question. Like I said, we have some good questions. So for those who are tuned in, we still have over 100 of you guys tuned in. We appreciate it. We're going to go a few minutes over because we just want to keep the conversation going. Once again, if you're joining late, we do have a hashtag Tiger Truths. Feel free to tweet out anything. If you still have some questions, we'll take a few more. I want to make sure to not hold our panelists too long. So I'm going to go through and look for a few more questions. I'll pose this next one really to whoever wants to answer it. Thought this was great. So I'm so over the phrase, and sorry, this one comes from Ashley, Germany. She says, I'm so over the phrase diversity and inclusion. If you could replace diversity and inclusion with two other words, what would it be? And what does that look like in the context of corporate America and or universities? That was a good question, Ashley. Wants to go, anybody? Payton, it looks like you want to answer it. Go ahead.
That's a difficult one. But I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. I would say equity and repairing.
Okay.
And you can take repairing wherever you think it needs to go. But until we can address the harms that continue to be caused, we can't move forward. And that's literally why we're in the position that we're in right now. And a lot of people don't necessarily want to have the conversation. It's cuter to use the words diversity and inclusion, It's cuter to post a Black, an Asian, and a white student on a flyer. I was in some of those Mizzou store promos, and we look cute. We look good. I will say that. But it didn't necessarily address the fact that we still have to always be intentional about pursuing equity. We always have to be intentional about like having real and honest conversations about our past so that we can address what our future is going to look like, because we're creating that, actively creating that every single day. So those are just two words that I can think of off the top of my hand. It's like equity and repairing.
That's great. Jasmine or Ayanna?
Equity was my word as well. I just want to, I can't even, that was a good question. Let's just say that. And I'm so tired of diversity and inclusion too, because again, it's a slogan and not an initiative. I'm just going to say I agree with Payton because I was not ready for that question. The only word that I could come up with was equity. But I do agree that that there needs to be some type of change that's there, especially if we want to use it. And we talk about diversifying campus, and if you look at campuses, they're diverse. That's not the problem. If we're talking about inclusion, we have Black cultural centers. We have all of these programs that are there, but then that idea of repairing campuses are thriving for our black students.
Great. I'm just going to try to push through so we can try to get as many questions as possible. Let's see. This one comes from Alexandra. Her question, and I'm thinking, I think any of you guys might be able to answer this one. Her question: since Greek life is such a large part of Mizzou and predominantly white, how should sororities and fraternities educate and restructure the white Greek systems in place?
I mean, I have a response that probably won't be with somebody what they want to hear, but I don't think that it matters. I don't feel like what white organizations are up to impact us in a way that we need to worry about restructuring for them. They need to do that internally. That's not our responsibility to think about or even brainstorm about. That's on them. And at the end of the day, there are Black fraternities and sororities at Mizzou, but even aside from that, there are plenty of other organizations. And find your tribe. Don't worry about to fix what was never meant for you. So I don't think that's something that we would need to really look into.
All right, cool. Let's see. We have like a lot of good questions here. Let's see. Sorry, guys. Let's see. Okay. So we have this question from Jeanette Porter. She said she joined the faculty in January 2018 as an assistant professor in StratCom. She said, what are the things you think I most need to do or provide to current Black Mizzou students to support them and get them through? What do you wish professors had done for you? She said she joined on the call a little bit late, so just thought I'd still go ahead and ask the question just in case.
When I think in terms of what faculty could do, I think of people like Stephanie Shonikin. I think of people like Melissa Click. I think of all of these people who were protectors. They acted as mothers to us, right? And honestly, I could tell her to look at people like that, right? I could tell her to look at people like Dace Garbino, right? Like, these were phenomenal people on campus who their support of their students went outside of their classroom. They were out there with us. They were at the table when we could not be there to make sure that they gave us that voice. And it goes way beyond the classroom. Now, can I speak to StratCom? No, that's not my major, right? Can I speak specifically to the profession that she's preparing students for? No, but really, really making sure that those students know that you are advocating for them, even when you are not sharing the same space with them. It's huge, because you want your students. I talk about Dr. Shonikin probably every single week, right? Because she's just so amazing, and you want your students to have that love and that to feel like they are supported. So just making sure that you're an advocate for them everywhere. Whenever you're at these conventions, whenever you are in the classroom, when you're outside of the classroom, when you're in these spaces with administration, making sure that you are always advocating for them and your students feel that love and support.
I was going to say, I had Dr. Shona on, I believe, my sophomore year, and that was like one of the most memorable classes I took. And as a lot of people are putting in the chat, they love her too. So, and I believe she's coming back to Mizzou this semester. Am I right? Right. So those students are definitely going to be in for a treat. She's awesome. Let's see. I'll do about one or two more questions here. So you're kind of the same, but I'll take part. So the first one is from Sean Earl. He said, how have you translated your activism at the university to society as a whole? And kind of like following up on that question, using this one from Ashley Holt, she kind of mentioned like how it was emotionally taxing during that time on campus. Like you carried a lot of that weight for a lot of people. How do you take care of yourselves mentally to keep doing this work and protect yourselves from burning out?
That's an amazing question from both Sean and Ashley, because I feel like, it's easy to think about what was in the past and it's easy to have those conversations. But when we look at what's now, we are in that, and we are in that times 10, and we are in that as adults. And it would be a straight up lie to say that it is not emotionally taxing. And particularly, for me, I am in New York. Melody is too. We are in the middle of it all. I'm by myself in my home. I don't have any roommates, and being away from family. So it is a lot to go through that and to unpack all of that, on your own, and really your life kind of being these computer screens and being these phone screens now. And I feel like, a lot of time people, to give the advice like, oh, unplug on this, on that. But it's like, at the end of the day, that's not that easy to do. People say it, but at the end of the day, when you can't go nowhere else, when I can't even go to the beauty supply, I ain't got nothing else to do. So I'm going to be on my screen in one way or another. So I think that what I have done is that I've tried to find new ways for me to channel my voice, to channel my energy, to channel my talents, and just really just in spending time like with myself and getting to know myself and, learning myself. Because with that, I feel like when I am giving my contributions to the world and talking about my experiences, I also understand them better. Because I feel like when you don't get a chance to unpack and sit and think about, things that you did experience in 2014 and 2015, those feelings from that time are still there. So spending time with myself to really, decompress and really understand it makes it easier for me to talk about now. It makes it easier for me to say what my requirements are when I go to jobs, and make it easier for me to understand people that are going through similar things, and being able to serve as a crux for them to help them as well. So I think for me, like I said, just really been, really taking time to better learn myself, better channel my energy into things that not only help me, but help me express myself, to do that for me and do that for others, and become a platform for other people too. So that's what's helped me a lot. And doing things like this, which of course, Melody and Ruben and Brian, thank you so much for putting this together. And that's what's really helped me throughout this rough time.
To hear. Payton and Ayanna, I'd love to give your perspective on this as well.
I actually was very, very lucky stepping into activism in 2014 because I had a huge support system. I had your founders of MU for Mike Brown. I had Naomi. I had Jennifer. I had Kay. I had Ashley. I had people who did concerned student work with me. Deshania, Storm, right? Drea, Autumn. I had all of these amazing people that were around me who were big on making sure that you take the time to heal, to making sure that you have the capacity for the work that you're doing. And I always knew that if I ever needed to take a step back and say, okay, Ayanna, today you need to just stay at home, I knew that they would always be there, right? And so I took that with me into adulthood, right? I took that idea of, if you do not have the capacity, don't feel like you're doing a disservice to the movement, because you have to take care of yourself in order to take care of a community, right? And so I keep that in my mind very, very often, right? And so when I have a day where I say, okay, Ayanna, you can't be out there in the streets and protest. Today, you need to stay at home. I know that it is okay. I don't feel like I'm in the wrong, right? Because I know that there are phenomenal people out there doing the work, and I know that it's not about me. I know that it's not about a single organization. I know it's about Black bodies across the entire country, across the entire diaspora, that are doing this work consistently every single day. And if Ayanna needs to take a day off, she can, right? And so that is just the amazing thing about it. And I'm happy that activism was actually always a healing space for me, And even though it is trying, it is emotionally taxing. That is true. It is emotionally taxing, but always knowing that there is a space for me when I come back, right? And that's the beauty in it. And also, this is for my younger people. I am far removed from Mizzou. Okay, I'm far removed from everything that happened in 2015. But what I had to realize is that as I come into adulthood, I have to find these spaces where I can actually still do this type of work, right? I talked about my classroom earlier. I don't have to be on the front lines when I'm serving these 110 students every single school year, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm still doing, and I hate this word, but I'm still doing the work. Right. So doing the work wherever it is you are, you don't have to be out there protesting. You don't have to, because the reality is that is not the end point. Right. Every time we protest, the question is always, so what's next? So find your space, find your lane, find what you can do within the community that you serve and what you know that you have the capacity to do, and do it. Because a lot of people don't have the capacity to be out there every night. A lot of people don't have the capacity to be on social media every day, right? So just finding whatever works for you with the capacity that you have to service the community that you're in, and truly, truly using that, because that's going to be a big part of your healing too.
I was gonna say, I just kind of want to jump in on that, because I know that's a big thing that people have been saying, not everyone can be on the front line, not everyone can do this, and especially in certain professions. And so that was, in a sense, kind of comforting, because for those who don't know, I'm a journalist, and obviously there are codes of ethics we have to follow. But one thing that I think, in a sense, kind of brought me joy, over these last couple of weeks, like you said, just kind of using my platform, my community, and, being able to pitch these guests. They're trying to get black and brown guests to, discuss these issues, being able to pitch those guests, to produce those segments. It's okay, I feel like I've been able to do something and kind of help educate people, through my own lane. And so I think, like you said, it's really important that everybody, can't do the same thing, but everyone can do something. And just so we have enough time, I just want to ask this last question of all of you. Once again, tomorrow being Juneteenth, what does freedom mean to you during this time? I'll let you guys think on that, because I know someone asked me that question last week, and I just thought that was a really good question with everything kind of going on. What does freedom mean to you?
I think this is a hard question. And I hate to say that, but as Black people in America, we've never known freedom. I can say that I've known spiritual freedom, right? I can say the different type of freedoms that I've known, but I feel like when I feel free is when I can walk into a space and be Black, and I don't have to worry about me being Black in that space, right? When I don't feel more comfort in I'm always gonna feel more comfort in my Black community. But when I can walk into a space that is completely white, and I don't have to worry about my Blackness affecting my opportunities, right? It seems so foreign. It seems like something that, it's a hard question, because what is freedom, right? Because freedom is going to look different to everybody. Man, you know what? I'm going to take a step back, because I think I have to think a little deeper on this. Nobody else was talking, so let me breathe and figure this one out.
Payton or Jasmine?
I can say, for me, like this is a very tough question, but I can just say, speaking that, there are so many versions of freedom. None of my versions of freedom involve the being comfortable around white people or making white people comfortable. So my freedom is literally being in the safe space with all of my friends, being, Black girls, Black boys, having a good time, doing whatever we want to do, and not even having to think about white people. I know that might sound bad, but but this is a safe space. But that's what freedom is to me, is really just not even having to think about that at all, and not even having that in my Rolodex, because that is not what I even think about. So that's what my plan is tomorrow, with me and all my girls go to the quarantine beach. So it'll be a good time.
Sounds fun. And Payton, finally to you.
Yes, I want to echo everything that everybody has said up until this point. It's interesting for me with freedom. I've always looked at it like freedom was internal. So for me, I always saw it as something that was aspirational, something that you have to constantly work towards every single day. Because despite being, Black and whatever issues and isms that comes with, we are also people. Like, we have to realize, like, the institution of Blackness was created because the institution of whiteness was created. So, like, what does it mean to, like, look internally and also recognize that our simple existence is the biggest form of resistance? And I don't think a lot of people necessarily think about that. Like, just us being in this space, us breathing in this space, us living and being in 2020, like us walking into these offices, us going to the grocery store, us driving our cars down the street, whatever it may be, that is the biggest form of resistance right there, because we are living constantly in a space that systematically and systemically tries to kill us, tries to take away whatever notion of freedom, whether it's mentally, physically. So I would say it's been aspirational for me in many different ways, but as I confront so many challenges now in my life, I really think that it's so much more about, like, you looking internally and trying to do the things, like taking care of yourself. And that's, to me, where freedom comes. Like, for me, like, I've been through a lot these past couple of months. All of us have, in so many different ways. I buried someone that I loved. I have a relative, my father's in the hospital right now. Like, I had to say goodbye to my mom. I'm like in this space right now where I'm trying to work every single day to be okay. But I want to be more than okay. I want to be free. I want to encourage people to do the same thing. Do whatever makes you happy. Do what, but more than happiness, do what finds you, I would say do what it takes to find joy. And joy is going to look different for every single person. So for me, like right now, it's lighting this candle and reconnecting with some pretty inspiring people. I don't know if Ayanna remembers, but I still remember sitting in the circle, in Jesse Hall as she stood up on the circle. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, the tour guides, like we used to, like this is really young. And Ayanna got out here with her bullhorn and she's letting her voice be known. Like, so many people who I've been inspired by, who have been gracious to me, who have taught me and allowed me to give grace and extend grace to myself. It was Naomi, it was Ashley, it was Jennifer, so many different people who I look to on a daily basis. I look at people's social media whenever I'm lost. I look to the people who inspire me, the people who I see living unapologetically all the time. And so I would say that freedom looks different. I do think that it is attainable, but I do think that it has to be something that is constantly, oh yes, Tiff, Danielle, oh my gosh. But yeah, I would just say that it's something that's really internal for yourself, and reflecting back on like 2015 and even before then, there were days when a lot of us just weren't okay. And I can only speak on my own experience because I can only I can only be an expert in my own experience. But there was significant trauma that was inflicted on so many of us. Even now, as we look at, like, some of us have been re-traumatized as we look at what's happening in society and have to deal with the reality of what's going on now. And so I would say with freedom, recognize that it's something that we work to day by day by day. And Ayanna said something powerful to the extent, like, do what you have capacity for. Not everybody can do everything, but every last one of us can do something. So find your something. And that's for everybody. That's the non-Black people of color. That's the white folk. That's the Black folk. Even if that something is just, staying in bed or waking up or watering your plants or buying 20 other plants in your house, whatever that is, like, find that freedom for yourself. Because I think that when we take care of ourselves, we can pour from we can fill up our cup so that we can pour on to others. So that's what I remain committed to right now.
Guys, this was, wow, like a really good panel. I feel really good just like having gotten a chance to hear from you guys' different perspectives. Like I said, we had almost 100 people or more than 100 people who tuned in. I just want to say thank you because, like I said, that was just really, really good. But before we wrap up tonight, I just want to do like a few more housekeeping things. So for everyone who's like been asking about education resources, as you can see on your screen right there, as well as I think what's being dropped in the chat. We have a couple of links for you. So the first one is going to give you access to Mizzou's IDE self-curriculum material. And so please consider texting it to your friends, to your family. So the conversation doesn't stop here, but it can continue outside of this panel. We also have the idea of like facilitating small groups to, or when I say we, I'm sorry, the broader MAA has been having an idea of like facilitating small groups to keep the conversation going and making sure actionable change happens. If you're interested in doing that, there's an email there at the bottom, president@MizzouNYC.com. Just email them and let them know. The second link is going to give you a little bit more info about Juneteenth, as well as that third and final link. There is a documentary about Concerned Student 1950. I would highly recommend everybody check it out. We've also asked people, or we've also had people asking how they can donate, how they can give back. If you're looking to push the conversation forward through donations, there's a few links there of the different scholarships and organizations you can donate to on Mizzou's campus. If you'd like to keep up with their panelists since they're here, we'll make sure that you'll get all this info and then some in a follow-up email tomorrow. But for my panelists, if people want to like connect with you, follow you on social, where can they find you? Or if you don't have to say, that's up to you too, whether LinkedIn, whatever works best.
Oh, I guess we can.
I am available on all socials. I don't know if, I guess I can drop it in the chat. I'll drop all my information in the chat for people that want to contact me.
Okay, great.
Cool.
And yeah, I just want to say once again, thank you so much for our panelists for taking the time to even go overtime to keep the conversation going. You guys were amazing. Like I said, I think this was a conversation that a lot of people wanted to have, that a lot of people just needed during this time. So I really do appreciate you just taking the time to open yourselves up and to be a part of this community with us. And a huge thank you to our audience members, everyone who asked questions, even for those questions we didn't get to. Hopefully we'll be able to do this another time in the coming weeks, coming months, and have more conversations like this. But once again, thank you everybody, and thanks for joining us, and hope you have a good night.